Welcome to the 5-7 podcast. I'm your host, Pri, and I'm joined with me by my co-host, Mike Salinas.
Good evening.
And today we have on a guest on the show, and his name is Lane. Kill me if I say this wrong. Belone.
That's perfect.
Awesome. Lane Belone is a U.S. Army Special Forces Green Beret veteran who has traveled to dozens of countries on 6 continents, who now helps people achieve high performance and gain fulfillment in life through travel. He uses his experience to clear mental blocks and gain life-changing clarity in weeks, sometimes days. He creates breakthrough experiences abroad to create life-transformative change in his clients. Lane grew up in Oklahoma and served in the military from 2005 to 2017, most of which as a Green Beret. During his service, he deployed to Iraq twice, Northern Africa, and all over Europe. During his adult life, he has climbed mountains, survived the Arctic, and many other physical feats. Upon discharge from the military, Lane and his wife took a 3-month road trip across the United States, visiting 37 states and even more cities. Then they moved to Panama to live as vagabonds. Sounds like a lot, man. Been pretty busy.
Yeah, I try to stay active.
Where are you from in Oklahoma?
So a small town called Veneta. It's known for a couple things. The two biggest things is it has the world's largest calf fry festival, and for a time period it was the world's largest McDonald's by one of the standards. So it was like a McDonald's over a international or a interstate highway. Small town, cool. 5,000 people. Yeah.
When I was in the military, I served in Lawton at Fort Sill for like 15 or 16 months. And it's really crazy, like Oklahoma, because it's so it's so flat. When you moved out of Oklahoma, was it a little bit, like in your special forces career, was it a little jarring to see like mountains and things like that?
Yeah, nature is awe-inspiring. It captures your attention. It takes your breath away, and especially large mountains, like a sea of mountains, so to speak, mountain ranges, with snow-capped tops. It's just a beautiful sight. So like the diversity of the kinds of terrain that we have in the world is awesome. And that's part of the reason why I love travel.
That's awesome, man. So what inspired you to join the military?
Well, it was a whim. My best friend and I, we were deciding what we wanted to do after high school. And so we basically played a game of rock, paper, scissors. And it was, if I won, we went to college. If he won, we'd both join the Army. And so he ended up winning best 2 out of 3. And that's how it started. Of course, the gravity of doing some kind of life-changing commitment really takes a turn that you may not, or that I didn't expect. And I may have joined kind of out of a whim, but it was one of the most meaningful steps in my life that I could ever take.
Wow. So what was your initial or your first MOS?
Yeah, so I was a Intelligence Analyst. And so I joined at 17, the delayed entry program, and I was just a young guy that didn't know where I was going. I had a lot of instilled principles and values based on sports and Boy Scouts growing up, but I didn't have any like surefire direction on what I wanted to do. So when I joined and the recruiter said, "Hey, you could do this job where you're gathering intelligence and you're doing all this cool stuff," I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And 17, didn't know what I was doing. I joined, and then basically just continued to do my best in whatever it was. And it was about a year and a half after that happened where I was like, I think I need something a little different. And that's where Special Forces kind of came into the picture.
And how exactly did that come into the picture for you?
Yeah, so I was stationed in Germany, and I was walking to the shop and on the door there was a flyer that said, "Hey, join Special Forces," and it had a couple cool guy pictures on there. I was like, "What's that?" Like I wasn't even exposed to it. Being away from kind of the large flagpoles, like Fort Bragg or some of the high speed bases in the U.S., being Oconus and being kind of away from that. I wasn't exposed to that kind of, I didn't know what special forces was. So I went to the briefing. It was in an auditorium, and I walked from the back, and how like auditoriums are, you have that, the front part that had this projector, and they were playing this like cool guy, promo video where like dudes were just falling out of the sky, blowing stuff up, shooting stuff, and I was just like, whoa. I don't know what all that stuff is, but I want to do that,
Yeah.
And so, so I was part of the brief, I joined the brief, signed up, was in selection a couple months later, got selected, and then, went through the whole, Special Forces qualification course, the 2-year journey.
How did you train, say physically and mentally for selection?
Yeah. So I was always, a guy that gave it everything that I could. I wasn't the most in shape guy, but I was always like the top 3. Part of my training was super simple. Of course, just doing normal PT stuff with the unit. But specifically for selection, I literally wore a rucksack everywhere I went for 2 months. Like as soon as the day started after PT and breakfast, I was wearing a rucksack everywhere, and people saw me walking around like, "What's this guy doing?" And that's what I did. And of course, I did ruck runs, regular runs leading up to it, and it was a pretty simple regimen. Since I wasn't exposed to a lot of the stuff, like being around a whole bunch of Green Berets or Fort Bragg, you could probably go find somebody and talk to them or whatever. I didn't have that luxury, so I just did what I knew I could do and just prepared physically because, in my mindset and a lot of other people, that the more you prepare physically, the longer it takes for you to have to tap into that mental stamina. And specifically, Special Forces assessment selection, you're going to have to tap into that mental game. That mental stamina. It's a requirement. But the longer or the better you prepare physically, the more you're prolonged to have to tap into that mental stamina. And so that's why guys train so much physically, so they don't have to, or they can prolong that mental tap.
I've been contacted on the our Instagram page, the 57 Podcast Instagram page, and I've had some guys ask me what can they do to prepare for Special Forces selection. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, so there's a lot of workout programs, and depending on what your advantage is based on your body type and profile, I would really take an honest assessment of 1, your strengths, and 2, your weaknesses. And so that first assessment of who you are, how you're built. Are you a runner? Are you just this dude that just knows how to like pump iron like a madman? Like are you just this huge jacked guy? Because ultimately, to pass selection, you have to have a very well balanced preparation. And of course, you're going to focus on your strengths, but you have to increase your weak points. So if you're like this bodybuilder dude, and you have to put in high intensity interval sprints, you have to put in some kind of runs, sometimes some kind of rucks. So you have to up that weak point that you have to at least a moderate level, like an adequate level to meet the standards. And then, of course, you have to build upon your strengths as well. So that first honest assessment is, your strengths and your weaknesses, and then do a lot of research to figure out how to increase your strengths and increase your weaknesses. So that's the overall universal stuff, because there's so many cool books out there that says, hey, you got to do this kind of ruck runs leading up to a point, weeks in advance, diet regimens and stuff like that. That's not what you're going to get from this. My advice here, because you can go look that up. But an honest assessment of where you're at, that's key.
So you made it through selection. What happened then?
Selection, I went back to Germany for. I was there for about 6 months until I actually PCS'd to Benning for airborne. So I did TDY en route. So I went to Benning, did airborne school, and then went to Fort Bragg. That 6 months was a kind of a not a weird moment but it was kind of weird. My unit was getting ready to deploy, and everybody was deploying but me. They were going out in combat. I was going to train, for a couple of years, and it felt a little weird, kind of leaving people behind, people that I had trained with, brothers, and ultimately, it was a decision that I made, and I was perfectly fine with it. But it was an interesting moment of leaving everybody kind of like and doing my own thing, and that, I guess, doing my own thing was a trend that I would continue to follow years to come.
How would you say your fitness changed from before and during selection to you're finally in the teams?
Yeah. Listening to your podcast with Mike, a very similar kind of journey. It first began just like kind of brute trial and error, giving it all you got, doing everything to the max. And as we continued to progress in physical fitness strategies and up in your game, basically got smarter. We were able to tap into Olympic athlete level strategies, coaches, and implement that kind of mentality into our training, and just basically overall being smarter with our training, because breaking down the body too much is not advantageous for any operator or anybody for that fact. So as the years progressed, everything got smarter, everything got more results based, kind of like the scientific approach, and really looking at the highest tiers of physical fitness. And then for me personally, it's been a mindset of longevity. Like, what can I do, or what kind of workout style regimen can I do for the next 50 years, so to speak? And of course, things are going to change, and I'm going to test things out, try new regimens, try new dieting, different kinds of workout styles, and everything like that. But the mentality is, what can I do? So that way, there are going to always be sprints. There's always going to be times of elevated stress, elevated workouts, elevated regimens based on things that I want to do. Like, for instance, I climbed Kilimanjaro about 5 months ago or so. So that was a special, different kind of preparation for that. Other kinds of competitions, you have to push yourself to the limit, so to speak, and that's okay. But the mentality is longevity.
Wow, that's you will get into your climbing a bit later, because that's really interesting, and it's funny, man, because it seems how fitness has definitely changed over the years, and diet is a big part of it, because back in the day, you would just pump iron and take creatine, and that'd be it. What kind of diet, or how did your diet change through your years in the teams?
Yeah, I mean, it was just the diets overall, like the chow hall, like the special forces kind of diet, I guess. Like they had specialty meals planning, and like the DFAC had that kind of planned out. In addition to that, I was continuing to kind of research, and eventually I moved towards a type of intermittent fasting called time restricted feeding. And for those that aren't familiar, it's basically you fast for about 16 hours every 24-hour period. And so I basically do my last dinner around 7 p.m. or so, and then I fast for the whole night, and then the next morning I fast until about 11 a.m. or noon or so, and that's where I have my first meal. So that's every day for the past. I've done that for 2 years, maybe once a month, maybe once every 2 months. I'll have a breakfast or something like that at a normal breakfast time. But other than that, I've been doing that every single day, and it's gotten a lot of great results. Specifically, one I'll point out is that I've noticed that traveling and being active and stuff like that, every once in a while I'll go like a couple weeks without doing any heavy lifting. And what I've noticed with this regimen is that my strengths and my size remain unaffected for longer. So if I, back in my military days, every once in a while there'd be like a week of not training very hard, and after that week I could tell that first hard workout afterwards, I'd be like, oh man, I haven't hit the gym, but now it could be about 10 or 12 days to where, like, if I had, if that happened, I could say, yeah, like I kept that strength much easier. So I've enjoyed it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm doing a bit of intermittent fasting myself. I'll eat it, probably have my last meal at about 6:30 p.m. and then I'll fast until about 10:30. And I've noticed a difference too. It's like, you're just not as full, I guess, during the day, or when you wake up, I should say. So when you
hold on, can I ask you? I got to ask one quick question here, if I can interject for just a second. Lane, one thing, I don't climb anything. I've never climbed any mountains, never climbed any hills, never walked up anything steep. So what I found interesting is that you have to pay a certain amount of money to climb these things, right?
Yeah. So if you're talking about the 7 peaks, mm-hmm. There's a monetary requirement. And one of the lowest requirements, or the cheapest climb you could do of the 7 summits is Kilimanjaro, because the more difficult, the more technical climbing, you have to have more specialized training. You have to go into more remote locations. It usually takes longer, and you have to have specialized equipment. So a lot of those things require a lot more money. Right. For Kilimanjaro specifically, depending on who you go with, what tour group, 1,500 to 2,000 is a pretty normal cost for the tour itself.
Wow.
Of course, you have to get there, and if you want to add a safari on there, that might be a little bit extra, but that's generally about the price.
Right. See, I'm over here. I'm kind of dumb, and I'm like, I thought you just walk up to the mountain and just start climbing. I'm like, tomorrow I'm going to go climb Kilimanjaro and just do my thing, and nobody's there to worry about it. But I had no idea there was some sort of cost associated with that kind of thing. Interesting.
Yeah.
So you deployed to Iraq twice. What would you say is the biggest difference between your first deployment and your second deployment?
Yeah, so both of my deployments were towards the end of the war, OIF 7 and then OND. And yeah, there was a huge difference. I mean, the OIF 7, still combat operations still going on, but still, of course, dwindling. OND was much less than that. So it was just and it wasn't that far away from each other. They were about like 6 months or so. But yeah, it was definitely at the end of the war. Things were just kind of, slowing down, and everybody could kind of feel it. And yeah.
Would you say it prepared you pretty well for deploying to Africa?
Oh, what's that?
Would you say that, going to Iraq, your experience there, would you say that prepared you well for Africa, or would you say that Africa is a completely different beast?
Yeah, I mean, any experience in combat is going to prepare you to some degree for any other follow-on missions, high risk or otherwise, because there's so many things that happen in combat or preparation for combat that are just less dramatic in a high-risk environment, or just a kind of a training kind of exercise, or a different kind of mission. So basically, if you have the combat operations, other things are at I wouldn't consider a lower tier. It's just a different kind of mission, but definitely prepared for sure. There's so many things that you can carry over from combat or from any mission in general. So any experience, any mission, deployment, you can always use that information for the next one.
Did you do any climbing while you were in the military?
Yeah, so towards the end of my career, I did a lot of Arctic training, and so in preparation for that, we did a lot of mountain training. And so specifically climbing in Austria, doing first learning how to ski well, because a lot of people, even if they do have skiing experience, they don't have the proper form. And especially if you're going to put on a 25, maybe a 45-pound ruck, depending on the kind of mission, while you're skiing, you have to have the proper form. And then on top of that, if you're doing some kind of mountainous movement, and you have these sleds behind you that you have a ruck on, and then you're dragging a sled. I mean, all these things that you have to learn, and that was critical for us to be able to get those basics down, and then just build upon those, and then do more technical climbing from there. We had a great mountain team. And these guys were just top of the line, super proficient. And I was actually a mobility team, but we were doing Arctic warfare, and so we kind of teamed up. Our team and the mountain team, we teamed up, and then we did a lot of training together. So it was we did a lot of mountain climbing, and then directly after that, we basically went up to the Arctic. Mountainous training or mountain training and Arctic training have a lot of similarities, but also there's a lot of differences. But there's a lot of things that you can learn from the mountain and then take it to the Arctic, and that's exactly what we did.
So when you got out of the military, and were you still climbing like just as a hobby?
Not that often, no. I'm very active with different kinds of travel, different kinds of activities. So mountain climbing, I hadn't actually done too much of, especially technical climbing. There's some hills and stuff. I climbed a volcano here in Panama in preparation for Kilimanjaro. So it did a little bit, but when I consider climbing mountains, I'm talking about like not very technical, but somewhat technical and more challenging than just being able to do a day hike kind of thing. So, but yeah, the plan is to continue with the 7 Summit kind of challenge, at least up until the last one, and I'm not sure exactly if Everest is going to happen, but base camp for sure will happen. So we'll get the first 6 summits for sure, and then base camp, and then I'm not sure what's going to happen. By the time that that final summit approaches, I don't know what it'll look like.
Yeah, I think that you're going to end up doing all 7, dude.
Yeah, I have that feeling too. Yeah. But we'll see though.
When is number 6 up?
So we have a little group that we have about 5 or 6 guys. We're planning for either Russia or I can't remember what it is. The one in the U.S. For later this year or earlier next year. So we're going at a slower pace, because I guess the fastest you can go would probably be like 4 or 5 years to do all of them. But conservatively, it would probably take 10 years to do all 7 summits. So yeah, we're just taking our time. But yeah, Russia or the one in the U.S. It will be the next one, either later this year or earlier next year.
By the time you get to Everest, at that point, say you've climbed 6 of the 7 summits, you'll probably get sponsored. You'll probably get a sponsorship for that, wouldn't you?
I mean, it depends on how a lot of other things go. As it stands now, it's just a personal kind of hobby, personal challenge. With my company, Increased Freedom, and my other ventures that I'm doing, the visibility may grow, and sponsorship may be in the picture, but it may not. So yeah, we'll just see how it goes. And there's definitely a story there for sure, because the 7 summits, or at least the 6 summits plus base camp, isn't the only kind of world challenge kind of thing that I'm looking for, because I still want to do North Pole, South Pole, and eventually visit all the countries in the world. So there's definitely a story there what that story is, I'm not exactly sure or how to tell it. But I'm writing it as we speak, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's a story that I want to hear because that's incredibly interesting. When did you start, getting interested? And I know you did Arctic training in the military, but what made you want to keep doing it when you got out?
Well, being in the military and being told kind of what the mission was, what to do, where to go. Being in the military and especially special forces, you knew that it was going to be something cool, something interesting, something out of the ordinary. So that aspect of it was great. But after a while, it became, for me specifically, something where I wanted to have more control over the places that I go, when I could go, and the things that I could do there. And so just kind of the freedom to explore the globe, as I wanted to, so to speak. And so the military gave me that opportunity to kind of get that taste of the wild or the so-called extreme or the nature. So by giving me that taste, I was able to then just kind of run with it after the military. I've only been out 2 years, so I'm still definitely working on all the different kinds of things that I want to do. So it's an ever growing process, but it's just something that if anybody asks you why do you want to climb mountains, and the common answer is because it was there.
Because it's awesome.
Yeah. And ultimately any challenge, any endeavor, any activity that you do is leading up to a feeling. So getting on top of Kilimanjaro, all right, the process, the journey, you're feeling something like, oh yes, like I'm feeling pumped up, camaraderie with the guys that I'm hiking with. But then up at the top, it's a very personal kind of feeling, and it's a feeling that you can only feel and experience yourself. And it's difficult to explain. And we all have these kinds of feelings, no matter what. It doesn't have to be climbing a mountain. It could be just some challenge that you overcome, some endeavor that you achieve. But at the very tip or the top of it, that point, you have a feeling that you're trying to arrive to. And that feeling is the thing that fuels all of us. And the climbing the mountain is the vehicle. The travel is the vehicle. Doing cool stuff in the U.S. or creating a podcast for people to grow as a person, those are all vehicles to arrive yourself at a point of a feeling. And so, some of my advice to a lot of people is that take an honest look at that feeling that you want to feel. I'm not talking about wishy-washy emotional stuff. I'm talking about powerful stuff that man, I want to do that. I want to climb. I want to feel that feeling of conquering a mountain or whatever it is that resonates with you. To really take an honest assessment of what that is, and then don't ever stop until you reach that point.
Yeah, that's really interesting when you talk about that feeling, because one of my buddies one time, he was like, hey, do you want to go rock climbing with me? And I have a problem with heights. I was like, I don't know, man. And he's like, just give it a shot. And, I was like, all right, fine. I'll give it a shot. So I did. And we went out and I climbed like 15 or 20 feet. I looked back and I absolutely fucking lost it, man. And we came down and that was it for the day. But, I went home and, and I was laying there and I was like, I'm absolutely terrified of heights, but that was actually a lot of fun. And I want to do it, and we went out, I think maybe a week later, and I climbed this 150 foot, rock face. And afterwards, it's that's not really high, but for me, I was I felt freedom. Do you know what I mean? I felt like I was on top of the world. It's really hard to articulate, but I mean, I felt like that, maybe kind of that feeling that you were talking about. And
yeah, that's that's a feeling of flow, which is a whole other topic. The Greeks had a word called ekstasias, and we've translated to ecstasy. And basically it's being in that full present moment that's all encompassing, where time is lost. And there are certain activities, like for instance, the guys that do the wingsuit jumps, right? Like that is immediately taps them into a state of ecstasis, like a state of flow, that of extreme concentration of in the moment where time doesn't exist. And I think that we all can reach that point, and with the advent of technology, altered states, which is a whole other topic, but there's a lot of different safe ways to do it, and on different levels. Even the practice of meditation is an altered state where you can tap into that state of flow or ecstasis. And they say that whenever you feel that for the first time, like that's a feeling that you just can't unfeel. And you'll want to do that again. And that's why you have these guys that are continuing to, base jump and do the wingsuit jumps until, ultimately a lot of them, they don't make it because they continue to try to feel that feeling. I think that there's going to be more safe ways to do that. And of course, there's so many different ways to get a state of flow, but it takes a lot of practice and self-mastery, but it's definitely achievable.
What would you say, for people, because a lot of people, they want to stay in their safe place and they want to, they want to do things, but at the same time, they want to make sure that 100% they're going to make it out of it alive. Like, what kind of advice do you have for people to try to leave their comfort zones?
Yeah. So, I would say just one step at a time. That's the best advice. Just go outside of the comfort zone. Being able to identify where that is and what makes you feel like, oh, I don't like that. Then just take one step outside of that, and then whenever you take that step, feel it, live it, and then get back into your comfort zone, and then reflect about it afterwards. And then after you do it, after you step outside of that comfort zone, you reflect on it. You're like, oh man, actually that wasn't too bad. That wasn't too bad. And then you say, okay, let me go one more step. And then you just take one more step. And then eventually you've walked a mile and you didn't even realize it. And then after so many times of doing that, stepping outside of your comfort zone by one step is the new norm. It almost feels like, oh man, I feel like I need to do something new. And it's not like an adrenaline junkie kind of feeling, but just like you kind of grow accustomed to the growth of stepping outside of your comfort zone. And it doesn't have to stop at just one area of your life. It'll expand into nearly every area of your life.
What was your trip to the Arctic like?
So I think I've been three times or so, two with the military and then one, with my wife. So each one, of course, the military were definitely different experiences. The one with my wife, the military, they were incredible experiences. A lot of rough, rugged living, a lot of kind of pushing the boundaries. So that aspect the challenging aspect was very welcoming. The trip with my wife was more of an exploration, I guess, with just really being encompassed in the moment. And so we did a tour of the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis. They're somewhat elusive, but if you go with a tour guide that knows what they're doing and have done it for a long time, you can kind of anticipate it, although that's not 100%. So by exploring that kind of nature, that wonder of the Northern Lights, kind of tapped into nature a little bit more than I did in a different way. So each experience offered a different lesson learned, a different life experience, and ultimately every single time, doesn't matter if it's going into the Arctic again or otherwise, taking the experience that you have from travels, from life in general, whatever it is, bringing that with you, but don't let that bias hold you back from experiencing that new place almost as if for the first time with no preconceived notions.
How did you prepare your body for the cold?
So yeah, specifically for the Arctic, it doesn't matter if we're talking Arctic or mountain. Again, it's the simple baby steps of taking your body to the next level and testing out how your body reacts to the cold, because everybody's different. And ultimately, what's going to make you survive and ultimately thrive is knowing your body extremely well. And so some guys, their hands get cold really fast, or cold first. Some guys, it's their feet. Some guys, it's their nose. They turn red. Some guys can feel stuff in their joints. Some guys are really hot. Some guys run really cold. So all of those factors that you have to just really experience and know about your body are going to allow you to wear the right clothing, bring the right equipment. And ultimately, whenever you're with a team, you'll be able to identify those strong points and weak points in your teammates or whoever you're going with, because ultimately you can know yourself very well, and you can have self-mastery and know how to anticipate how the cold weather is going to affect you. But ultimately, sometimes it's your buddy saying, "Hey, dude, your nose is really cold. Like, you need to, warm it up. Like, you're going to get frostbite." And then you do the preventative measure. But yeah, so it's really just taking that experience and stepping into it. So if someone is looking to go to the Arctic and do some kind of rigorous stuff, I would say start in your backyard, so to speak. Go to the closest place where you can get cold, and then do something that is so-called just outside of what you know. Of course, do tons of research, talk to people that have done it. Go with somebody that is experienced, so that way you can learn via osmosis, because there's so much stuff that is nuanced with extreme training. And we're talking about Arctic training here. So there's so much nuance that until you live through it and feel it and experience it, you won't know exactly when to apply certain things. Only by doing it, and then ultimately having somebody, a trainer, a mentor, or somebody that is just experienced to say, "Hey, this is that time for you to do that one thing we're talking about," and then you're, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." And so that's the take it step by step, and that's it.
Let's talk about your road trip. You said that you traveled to 37 states in 3 months.
Yeah, so we departed Germany March 2017, and then we spent about a month or so in Colorado, and then we departed for our road trip from Greeley, Colorado, and we generally went northwest. So our first stop was just short of Yellowstone and the Teton Mountains, and then we just went counterclockwise and made our way to Seattle, the Oregon, Northern California coast, and just went all the way around to the southern, Florida, then the East Coast, Niagara, and then back to Colorado. And the cool thing about that experience was two things, right? The diversity of the U.S. We were able to see the different cultures, the different foods, the different lifestyles, the different mentalities, even as short as a couple of days. Like Montana, for instance, had a totally different mentality than the people in Seattle. And those were just like a couple of days apart. And so many times that happened. And to be able to see that diversity, but at the same time, to be able to see the overwhelming similarities, because oftentimes when we're watching the news, we see all this divisive rhetoric saying, it's the left versus the right, it's these people versus those people, and you can kind of almost get caught up into this mentality of, there's so much difference in the U.S., and to a certain degree there is, but it's really making a difference out of that 1%, because the 99% of the U.S. is so similar in so many different ways. And we can nitpick on the differences, but ultimately, our similarities are overwhelming. So it was an incredible road trip. And one word of advice I will never do a 3-month road trip again. After 2 months, that was the time where it was like we were having the time of our lives, but man, this is a lot, you know.
Ready to go home?
Yeah. It was just, on the road constantly, and I mean, we spaced it out very well. But even then, every little cluster of where we stopped, we were pretty much seeing somebody that we knew, and they were only going to see us for 2-3 days or so. But so they were fresh. They were ready. Like, let's do this, and this, and we're like, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it was a great experience. I wouldn't have changed anything about it. But for future road trips, we'll definitely won't pass the threshold of 2 months, maybe not even 1 month. So, but it was an incredible experience, and I recommend anybody in the U.S. to take an extended road trip. It doesn't have to be 3 months; it could be 2 weeks. But get on that open road. One of the coolest things I like about road trips is that you get to slowly ease your way into the new culture. When we travel via plane, we lose out on the transition of one place to the next, and we are just immersed in it without that kind of nice smooth transition. And I like that transition, that feeling of, this is kind of the same, but it's a little different, and it allows you to observe the nuance of culture, the people, and it's just a cool experience. It's a cool way to travel, and I recommend it to anybody.
What made you want to move down to Panama?
So Panama was something that was a move that made sense. My wife, she was born here, so her mom, full Panamanian, her dad, Air Force. So her dad came down here to Panama, stationed, met my wife's mom, of course, had my wife, and then they moved to the U.S., and that's where my wife grew up. So my wife, we have half of her family's down here. And so when we left Germany, we were there for 3 years in the military. We got out, we did the road trip, and then it just made sense for us to, at the time, to continue to live abroad and kind of live this kind of overseas lifestyle, this vagabond lifestyle. And, it also allowed us to get to know her family. And it was just the move that we made in 2017, and it was the right move during that time. And ultimately, this vagabond trip had to come to an end. And at the time of this recording, 2 days from now, we'll be actually moving back to the U.S. And so we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, you'll be able to listen to the podcast in America on Monday when it's released to everybody.
Yes.
So could you tell us about your company, Increased Freedom?
Yeah, so Increased Freedom, like we talked about before, ultimately feeling is the thing that we want to arrive to. And that feeling that Increased Freedom helps you get to is that feeling of bliss, that ultimate, like, yes. And our logo is of like a guy, kind of outstretched arms, kind of soaking in the moment. Could be on top of a mountain, could be at the beach, could be at your grandma's house, for all I know. But that feeling of like, yes, this is exactly what I need right now at this particular moment. Because life is dynamic, life is ever changing. But right now is the moment that we want to seize, and to feel that in the moment is what we try to help you with. And we do that 2 ways. We do that via high performance mindset coaching, and then we actually help you plan a trip overseas with embedded principles and values to allow for a transformative experience to occur. So those are the 2 ways that we kind of attack that kind of arriving to a feeling. And it's been a great learning experience, and it's just a thing that I wish that everybody would try to experience travel to grow. So
what kind of mindset principles do you are you teaching people?
Yeah, so the four main ones are that you should implement every single day during your travels is education, connection, solitude, and now I'm on the spot. And
It's all good.
Education, solitude, connection, and discomfort, right? So embedding all of those into every single day, it doesn't have to be like your whole day is dedicated to these activities, but just sprinkle them in there. Connection, that is having a conversation or connecting with somebody that you don't know, or it could be connecting with somebody you do know that you're traveling with. And something that I recommend is just having a conversation with a stranger for 15 minutes every single day while you're traveling, and really embed that curiosity, of that genuine curiosity into their story, who they are, what they're about, and so that will help spark that connection. Education is real simple, just consuming some kind of good book, course, podcast like this one right here, something like that to help you get some kind of new information and educate you in a meaningful way. There's so many different topics and stuff that you can learn about, educate yourself with. So and it'll always change. So implement that on a daily basis. Discomfort. That's, we talked about that before. Just taking that small step every single day, and it could be combined with a conversation. If you're an introvert and you don't like to talk to people, well, just talk to somebody for 5 minutes. And if that makes you really uncomfortable, that's what you should do. And knocking two birds out with one stone. But whatever that discomfort is, and it's not about living a life of discomfort. It's about those small steps, and then you get back in your comfort zone, think about it, and then you grow like that. And the final one is solitude, and that's spending just a couple moments a day reflecting on those other three elements. And you can even take some notes about it, journal about it, but just reflect on what did that mean? When I connected with that person, or what how could I apply that education thing that I read in my life, or even tomorrow, or that discomfort, what was it? Why was I really feeling discomfort about that, and now I'm feeling a little bit better. Just kind of think about why and the effects of those other three elements, and if you do that every single day, there is a very high probability that you will grow and you'll come out the other side transformed in a positive way. And so those are the four principles and values. Of course, there's other smaller techniques that, depending on the person, that we help you with.
Where would you recommend maybe three places recommend that people travel outside of if you live in the United States, outside of the United States?
Yeah, so Europe is probably the number one. It's something that is outside of the familiar, but not too outside. And ultimately, everybody's different. But for me, the general advice or universal advice, for this kind of thing that I'm giving without specific details, is just take the next step outside of the comfort zone. And because if someone that's listening to this right now that is freaked out about dirty stuff or dangerous places, then that's not the place. That you don't want to go to a place that's war torn or very dirty or whatever the case may be. Ease into it, and Europe is the best place for that. For me, if you're going to do Europe, I'll probably do a 10-day trip, maybe even 2 weeks, and pick 2 big cities that you want to go to, and then just spend a week or 5 to 7 days at each one of those places and really explore those cities in a lot of different ways. That's what I would recommend for people, is to probably go to Europe, go to 2 cities, spend 10 to 14 days, and then really get to know the city intimately.
What would you say is a place that you went to that you were really maybe shocked or taken back by? It's like a place where you were like, man, this place is it's just awesome. I had no idea that this place was so beautiful.
Yeah, for me, nature is what really drives that feeling of awe. Of course, the cities are great, the people, the great food, that kind of stuff. But for me, nature. When we visited Norway, the secludedness of that feeling of just kind of being in the middle of nowhere with seemingly nobody around, and that vastness of nature, that awe-inspiring, fjords, or that sheer nature. So Norway was one of them. Peru was another. And then there's varying levels of degrees of just like cool nature stuff. But for me, it's nature. That's and being kind of secluded gives me that feeling of like, man, and it's not insignificance, because that could be the feeling. Like if if someone were to look out in the ocean and like, oh man, I'm so small compared to the ocean. Or if I go to the middle of Sahara, or go to the Arctic, like nobody's out here, like, and you can almost feel small, but at the same time, you can feel very empowered that us as humans can almost conquer whatever we put our mind to, both physically and mentally. And to kind of understand that and feel that fully in these kind of secluded places, you're like, man, that's pretty cool. So that's what really kind of drives me a lot is nature.
It is a place that you went to and you're like, wow, the food is just unbelievable here. You can say in a good, how about in a good way, in a bad way, like a place that you went to and you're like, wow, the food is just absolutely superb here. And another place that you went to where you're like, you know what, I don't really like it here.
Yeah. So, the first thing that kind of came to mind, it's not that original, but being able to eat fruits from the local, like that place where it was grown, like pineapples, and like bananas and stuff like that, to where it just doesn't taste the same. Like once you taste like the right way to eat it, and it's like ripe and all that stuff. Like here in Panama, like they have awesome pineapples, and I didn't really like pineapples before, because like before, they kind of have to pick it beforehand and to transport it, so it kind of gives you that sour kind of feeling or taste. But here it's just perfect. Same thing with papaya in Bali. Papaya and banana in Bali was just incredibly rich in the taste and nutrients and stuff like that. Man, I mean, I'm the kind of guy that likes all kinds of foods, but I'm the kind of guy that picks a very specific dish in that cuisine, and then that's about all that I eat from that cuisine. Like Thai food, I like pad Thai. Indian food, I like just a specific chicken jalfrezi. It's like chicken and spicy kind of like pepper stuff. All these different kinds of cuisines. Like I try a whole bunch of them, and then I'm like, yep, that's the kind I like, and then that's pretty much what that's my go. I have a go-to for most different kinds of cuisines.
Yeah, I do too. When I was in Korea, like my first day, well, not my first day, maybe like it might have been like 2 weeks in. They're like, yeah, well, we're going to take you out. We're going to go out for Chinese food. I'm like, all right, cool. So we go to this Chinese restaurant, and I'm looking at the menu, and it's all in Chinese or Hangul. I don't remember. But I was like, I was talking to one of the guys. I was like, hey, where's the Mongolian beef? And they're laughing at me. They're like, dude, this isn't America. I'm like, is Mongolian beef like American? Or I thought it was Chinese food. They're like, yeah, dude, that's like American Chinese food. And I was like completely screwed.
Yeah, Chinese food in every single country is slightly different. That's the thing is, with Chinese food, like that country's culture and kind of cuisine, like has a very impactful. It has an impact on that kind of Chinese food. So it's Chinese food is different all over the world. And my wife was just in China, I think 2 months ago, and she just said it was just incredible, like totally different than the U.S. Chinese food, but just incredible food. Yeah, said she ate the best 2 weeks of her life there.
No Panda Express in China then, huh?
No, not at all.
Well, hey, brother, we appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. It was really informative. I'm gonna want to get you back on to here after you climb your next peak, and where can people reach you on social media and website if they want to plan a trip or what have you? Where can you be found?
Yeah, so everything's Increase Freedom. So increasefreedom.com, at Increase Freedom for Instagram, and then Increase Freedom on Facebook. Those are the places you can hit me up, and if you just have questions, shoot them my way. If you want to just learn some stuff, that's cool too. Just so many people have helped me along the way, inside of the military, outside the military, post-military. That it's just my feeling that giving back is what I have to do. As I continue to grow, continue to learn, it's just a never-ending cycle of giving back and helping other people in the best way that I can.
Well, thanks, Mike. Hey, Mike, do you have anything?
No, thanks a lot for your service, and I appreciate the stories and coming on here with us.
Yeah, man. We definitely want to thank you for your service to our beautiful countrymen. And no, go on ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you for serving as well. And it was just an honor to be on the podcast and sharing cool ideas, having a good conversation. You guys are doing great things, and just continue to do what you do.
Thanks, brother. Well, everybody, that's all we got for you tonight. This is Lane, Mike, and Pri out.